beginning then from the preface to the book. In 1990, a legal conflagration threatened Ananda's existence more profoundly than any natural calamity, such as the forest fire in 1976. Self-Realization Fellowship, SRF, the organization founded by Paramahansa Yogananda in 1925, launched a complex and far-reaching legal attack against Ananda that ultimately lasted 12 years. The heart of their lawsuit, as the presiding judge Edward Garcia later observed, was to put Ananda out of business.
This book is the story of that battle, which was fought in the courts, in the press, on the internet, in flyers dropped from airplanes, and ultimately on the steps of the United States Supreme Court. Here then is a David and Goliath tale, the dramatic story of how a small group of people fought and won a victory against a seemingly unbeatable opponent. Our victory was not for ourselves alone, but one that may well protect the religious rights of future generations of Americans.
From this point, all the following readings are from the book and quote John Parsons' words. These events started long before I ever heard of Ananda. Perhaps it began in 1955, when Dayamata took over SRF's reins as its third president. Or maybe in 1962, when she booted Kriyananda from the organization. Perhaps, as the parties all seem to believe, it began lifetimes ago.
For 10 years after Yogananda's passing in 1952, Kriyananda rose to the position of vice president and was a member of the board of directors of the SRF organization. By the early 60s, he was serving overseas as SRF's principal representative in India. But in 1962, he was unexpectedly summoned to New York City. There, he was informed that he was fired from the board, expelled from SRF, and instructed to leave. Just like that, without warning or explanation, after 14 years as a monk.
Years later, during the litigation, it became clear to me that the ladies who then ran the organization had issues with Kriyananda's charismatic and elegant leadership. The women on the board wanted to protect the legacy of their days with Yogananda by sanitizing and preserving his memory, while Kriyananda advocated a more dynamic application of Yogananda's teachings to a changing world.
Up through the 1980s, Kriyananda steered Ananda in directions that would not conflict with what SRF was doing. When he founded Ananda, he named it the Yoga Fellowship, later changing the name to the Fellowship of Inner Communion, to avoid any similarity with SRF's or Yogananda's names. In his futile attempts to establish a harmonious relationship with SRF, Kriyananda even offered to give the entire Ananda village to SRF 3 times. But the SRF board would have nothing to do with any community that Kriyananda had founded.
Over the years, Kriyananda and the Ananda community came to realize that regardless of what they did or did not do, there would be no rapprochement with SRF. At a lengthy and lively meeting in January 1990, the community decided that it was time to act. That action included adding self-realization to the church's name as an expression of Ananda's ultimate spiritual goal. SRF heard immediately about Ananda's declaration of spiritual independence, and now, weeks later, SRF was threatening to file suit.
The litigation that ensued morphed over the years into 4 lawsuits and 2 appeals, together with writ petitions to both the California Court of Appeal and the U.S. Supreme Court. Its web embraced the two churches and Swami Kriyananda, as well as a former Ananda member and the minister who spurned her. Ultimately, everyone who touched the case got named as a defendant in one lawsuit or another, and SRF found itself a defendant in its own sexual harassment suit. Our cosmic drama also spawned at least 3 other satellite lawsuits and 2 appeals involving star-crossed strangers who inadvertently ventured too close to the litigation.
In its suit, SRF claimed that 1, Ananda falsely described its goods and services in violation of federal law. 2, Ananda had infringed and diluted and tarnished SRF's self-realization trademark and its Paramahansa Yogananda service mark. 3, Ananda also infringed SRF's copyrights by quoting things that Yogananda had said in numerous books, magazines, and talks. 4, Ananda violated SRF's exclusive right to use the name, voice, signature, photograph, and likeness of Yogananda, who was a deceased personality. 5, Ananda copied and distributed and thereby infringed 7 recordings of Yogananda's talks made between November 20th, 1949 and January 5th, 1952. 6, Ananda used the name Church of Self-Realization as deceptive advertising, unfair business practices, and unfair competition.
SRF asked the court to order that all of Ananda's income from the sale of its books, tapes, and services be gathered together and held in trust for SRF's benefit. SRF requested that the court award millions of dollars in damages and more for punitive damages against both Ananda and Kriyananda.
In addition, SRF claimed that at least 2 injunctions were needed, one right away and then a permanent one later, prohibiting Kriyananda and Ananda from ever holding themselves out as teaching anything by or about Yogananda.
That October morning, Garcia granted most of SRF's requested injunction. It was bad news for sure. Like a batter with a count of 2 strikes, we were in trouble. Although SRF, as the plaintiff, still carried the burden of proof for each of its claims, that burden had now effectively shifted to Ananda.
Most of SRF's claims in the lawsuit can be summed up in SRF's assertion that Yogananda had given everything to SRF: his physical assets, his intangible rights, and even his personal attributes, such as his name, voice, and likeness.
We assumed that SRF would assert confidentiality concerning personnel matters, financial data, and information about the inner workings of the board of directors. But SRF had a more embracing vision of confidentiality. Everything, literally everything about SRF was confidential, including its history, writings, and teachings. SRF claimed that every fact about Yogananda's life was confidential. The world was supposed to know only SRF's manicured version of Yogananda's life, a reverent biography that, following years of editing, no longer reflected Yogananda's electric vitality and the exuberance that drew people to him. SRF understood that maintaining its story of who Yogananda was and what his mission meant depended on keeping its trove of records and writings secret.
Word long had swirled down from Mount Washington that intelligence about Kriyananda went straight to the office of the president, where Dayamata and her sister would review it and then place it in a special K file that they kept in the president's outer office. The rumors proved true. Officially, SRF did not care what Kriyananda did. Privately, SRF tracked his every move and obsessed over every writing. The leadership of SRF read everything he wrote.
On the morning of April 24th, 1992, we stood again before Judge Garcia. Garcia began his ruling by agreeing with Ananda that the way both parties used the term self-realization was generic. Yes, he then abruptly continued the rest of the hearing to a later date. He told us he hadn't decided these issues yet because the paperwork was overwhelmingly voluminous.
Finally, on June 21st, 1993, Garcia gave us the good news. He not only affirmed, but expanded on his ruling that Ananda could use the phrase self-realization. Then he dissolved the preliminary injunction.
Ananda once told Garcia that if he lifted the injunction, it would change its legal name to Ananda Church of Self-Realization, with Ananda formally part of the name. When Garcia dissolved the injunction, he placed no limits on what Ananda could use. Ananda was now free to change back to Church of Self-Realization, the name that triggered the lawsuit. Nonetheless, Ananda followed through on its word. The confusion that SRF feared never happened.
Judge Garcia's June 26, 1992 ruling expressly placed several key works in the public domain, including the 1949 Whispers from Eternity, Cosmic Chants from 1938. We were to discover that the decision without mentioning the work by name also negated SRF's claim to the copyright of the autobiography of a yogi, recognized as one of the 100 most significant spiritual works of the 20th century.
After that first summary adjudication motion, Ananda rolled from victory to victory in Sacramento. By June 1997, the Ninth Circuit had confirmed Garcia's principal orders, and further rulings in the district court had ground the case down to a handful of claims about some audio tapes and a few photographs.
SRF appeared to take every opportunity to play the money card and increase costs. And with no end in sight, Ananda began to feel the pinch. You cannot win motions or appeals if you cannot afford to pay the lawyers, do the research, and cover the myriad costs that justice jealously demands. Without the unflagging support of Ananda's members, friends, and the community, SRF's Take No Prisoners strategy would have worked. The donors who gave beyond their comfort level deserve their laurels. Their support over the long haul, in good days and bad, through victories and defeats, lent Ananda the time and the material to last the course.
Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends. Then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends. Then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun.
The litigation spanned more than a decade and proved a transforming experience for everyone involved. Ananda made Yogananda's teachings available for the world.
On January 3rd, 2003, Ananda sent out the last case update to Ananda supporters announcing the end of the lawsuit. There were still bills to pay, but the bleeding had stopped, and it was time to mend. Its concluding comments expressed a sentiment I heard from many at Ananda during the lawsuit and from everyone since the judgment. Now that the long, costly lawsuit has finally ended, we at Ananda hope that there can be increasing harmony between the two organizations in the years to come, and that we can, in time, become friends. We extend our sincere love and friendship to all our Guru Bhais, our fellow disciples, in Self-Realization Fellowship and everywhere.
Please stand, everyone. Let's sing Thy Light Within Us Shining. Thy light within us shining, has shone where freedom lies, from earthly walls confining, to soar in spirit skies. How oft like sheep we stray apart, now guided by thy ray, in inner freedom of the heart, our night has turned to day.
Please be seated, and we'll remove the chairs.
Can you bring my chair, please? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now it's my great joy to get to introduce to us all our friend, longtime friend, attorney, helpful in many, many different ways, and for Ananda through the years, but especially generous in spirit at this time for us to have written this beautiful story about the battle that we had to fight, we were forced to fight and defend ourselves in. I shared with some of you that I was present when Swami Kriyananda first met John Parsons, who we're about to introduce to you, our attorney. And the SRF had just filed complaints against us that were about that thick and very unpleasant to read. And John had helped Ananda in Palo Alto in another situation with the housing scene down there in the apartments, just a minor thing at that point. And so the woman who was helping Ananda, Sheila Rush, who's now Naidruva, recommended John to Swami. And I was present at that meeting, and John was so delightfully honest and charming in the way he tried to dissuade us from having to set foot in the court system. He said, don't expect fairness. So many things are dependent, you know, the background of the judge and of each member in the jury, and what side of the bed they got up that morning, and you know, whether they had an argument with their spouse or not. You know, there are just so many variables that can take place in the court. So try to do everything you can to avoid it. But we were given no choice in the end. We had to fight this battle or we wouldn't exist today. We had to defend ourselves. And I remember when I had to testify in this case and some of the other cases that spun off of this case, which John will surely touch on. And John was preparing me as a witness, and he sat down on the floor with me, sort of cross-legged by a coffee table with a cup of tea, and he said, and mind you, John is not on this path, but I think he has some old Oriental samskars. So he just looked at me and he said, and this is, I think, I know how he prepared everyone. He said, speak only the truth as best you remember it in as few words as possible. And he turned the whole craziness of having to be in the world of the courtroom into sort of a Zen experience of meditation. You had to listen. You had to develop the art of listening. You had to listen to only the question asked and answer it. And I found it very, very helpful. It really spiritualized the process of having to go through what otherwise is a very unpleasant experience. With John, it made it surreal somehow. It put it in the right context for us spiritually. He became a friend through all these years and is still a friend. John's not on this path, but he's an honorary devotee. John Parsons. Thank you.
Let's see. Excellent. Oh, perfect. Is that too loud? And I might wander away from the podium. I'll try not to. I always like to move around a bit. First of all, it's always a joy to be with people like you. The Ananda people have always inspired me, still to this day. I'm so impressed with what you have done, what you continue to do on a day-to-day basis, living principles instead of just talking about them once a week. Second of all, I'm humbled and honored to be with you here tonight. They have done a great job on this program. I was so impressed. That's so sweet and wonderful. And love this opportunity to talk with you a little bit. I have a couple points I'd like to make, but I always believe in a very living, free-form thing, so we'll kind of see where we end up at. And I'm going to keep it to half hour. I understand they've given me half hour. I'll keep it to that. First of all, and by the way, you know, I'd forgotten some of that stuff, and you saying it, I appreciate that. It brings back. And I'll also note, I think it was Catherine who actually wrote the final words that are in the book. That's what I was informed. So I know it went out under your signature, at least, a number of years ago. So a couple, what I'd like to do is start by telling you why I wrote the book, what's wrong with the book, how I tried to make it a better book than it is, and then some thoughts on gosh almighty, what do we make of this? What do I make of it? What lessons can we maybe glean from it? And what do we do with this whole thing? First of all, I've written a story of good guys and bad guys. I've written a story of winning and losing. And if that's all so much duality, maybe that's all so much delusion. But there's something real that has happened here. There's something real going on with Ananda. When I first went up to the village in 1990, it was like an electrifying experience. I was at Foothill about a couple of weeks ago and got a few moments on the stage with Swami. And I'll tell you that the chanting that they did before that performance, it was like a magical moment. It actually took me back. I'd forgotten what I was going to say that night. And it had taken me back to, what are we talking about, 20-some years ago now? You know, and it was that magic. And the group tonight singing, Many Hands Make a Miracle, I think that was the first song I heard up at the village. And so it's just wonderful to be able to spend a little time here with you. Okay, why I wrote the book. First of all, it's a heck of a story. It's not just a lawsuit, you see, because it's got all these twists and these turns. It's got a beginning where we almost lost, then the vigorous efforts to come back, and we do, and we come back, and we turn around this almost loss into this glorious victory. And we have bad guys, honest to God, bad guys. Okay, I'll mention him. Michael Flynn. He's a bad guy. And I say that advisedly, having met many people in my life. And then at the end, he gets thrown out of court. Now, how beautiful is that? How symbolic, okay? Where it's kind of like the rat sneaks in, does a lot of mischief, is finally discovered and thrown out the door. Love it. Okay, so first of all, I wrote it because I think it's a good story. Second of all, I wrote it because the Ananda people who lived through it, the Ananda people who are coming, newer generation coming now, joining Ananda now and in the future, as well as the rest of the world, should know what happened. During the 12 years, there was a lot of confusion. There were up times, down times. We were in doubt as to what was going on often. There was a period of time, we call it the mailbox wars, when notices started popping up in mailboxes and people become confused. And it's often difficult to make much sense out of these things as they're happening around you. There's just too much going on. This surprises you. That takes you back. This is a development you didn't expect. You've got to stay the course. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book is to now make sense in my own mind, as well as in a more general way, of these events that transpired. And some of them are near miracles. In this incarnation, I am not yet on the path. But But dang, there's some stuff that just happened which almost seems to defy some more rational world explanation. That needed to be told. Second, or third, I guess. During the Bertolucci phase of the lawsuit, declarations were released. There was a lot of scurrilous stuff in the internet, which is still out there. There was a lot of partisan rant that has now made itself permanently, as is the nature of the internet, permanently out there. A lot of that is seriously misdirected. A lot of that seriously tells only part of the story. The book needed to tell what happened, particularly with that Bertolucci phase of the lawsuit. As I'll get back to that in a moment, but as I say in the book, that just caught us, just completely blindsided us, where we couldn't even examine witnesses, and we had to let them say whatever they wanted to. That needed an explanation. That needed the truth to be told in some way now, which is available for the future as well. In addition, I wrote it as a celebration. All right? This has been a blessing in my life. I like to think I've done some good, and people have told me I have, and I'm grateful for that. But what I'm truly impressed with was working with the people at Ananda. Wonderful souls. So many great souls. There are some people like Latika and I, you know, I'm not certain I believe what I'm going to say, but I think we had prior lives together. I don't necessarily believe in prior lives, you understand. But what else is the explanation? So what I tried to do was then create a engaging story of a real-world drama that was well worth telling, that had not been truly told yet, and that people could take away and hopefully either have some closure on some issues which remained open, or see now what it was that those who were fighting in the trenches really had to go through. Now, the problems with the book. 12 years distilled down to 170 pages. You gotta leave one or two things out, all right? So there were many stories which happened, many wonderful events, many touching experiences that just didn't make it into the book, and they just couldn't. There were, for example, I'll give you just a couple examples. During the lawsuit, and it started in, let's say, 95, early 95, when there was some confusion in the community and people weren't certain what was going on, and you know, what was Swami's role as leader and what was his past experiences. Swami started coming out with a series of letters. They were open letters to the community, to the SRF board, all of that. Now, one thing a lawyer hates is for their client to start making public statements in the middle of a lawsuit, all right, which you don't even review before they go out. All right, so it's a spiritual matter. You know, I mean, the Pope's lawyer isn't going to say, "Let me read that bull before you sign it." All right? So, Kriyananda felt the need to make statements to explain to the community what was going on. Didn't want him to do it. Didn't want him to do it. What are you going to say? How's it going to be used? It's going to be used against you in your next deposition. The depositions never seemed to end. And Kriyananda's went right up until almost the eve of trial, years of depositions. And I didn't want him to say anything. You know, say zero and they can't impeach you. Say zero, they can't call you a liar. Say zero, they give nothing to question you on in your deposition. But of course, Ananda's more important than Swami's next deposition. So he did it. And I was truly impressed with the effect of that. In retrospect, I think it was a great idea. Loved it. And they're well written. And in fact, they're fairly major statements now on issues of celibacy and things like that. So none of that made it into the book. Those sorts of things, where I would have loved to have spent in fact, I think at one draft I did have 2 or 3 pages on it. And we're going to include some of those letters as an appendix. I changed my mind to the point I thought they were worth including as part of the record. And the editing and the decisions along the way, that kind of fell out. The LA trips, for example, also did not make it in there. There were times when the Ananda community would get mobilized and they went down to LA and they were down there then in a convocation, and that's where the famous open letter to the SRF board was written for. All of those wonderful activities by the Ananda community rising up in a single fist of anger and response, those didn't make it into the book either. And I've got to tell you, I just read the book myself for the first time in this version of it. Oh, I thought it was pretty good. I just read the book myself. Okay, I'm sorry. I bring a sense of humor. And you know, I've been practicing law for 33 years. And the practice of law is not always an upbeat, happy occasion where you're always celebrating stuff and people come into your office off the street with good news. You know, they usually come in with bad news and need some sort of emergency. Okay, so my humor is my defense mechanism developed over the decades to deal with the ceaseless track of humanity muddying up my carpets. I do not mean by my humor to make light of what was happening or the issues involved. So when you read the book and they've got those little throwaway zingers, as my wife likes to call it, when I direct them at her, keep in mind, I do not mean to lower the level of discourse on these very important matters, but rather it is in fact a lawyer's personal account. You're getting my story on it. Now, here is the problem with my story. My story is my story, but this really isn't my story, okay? This is Ananda's story, it's Kriyananda's story, and it's the legal team's story. It's the grassroots of Ananda's story. So when I sat down and actually had a chance to read the final version, we're editing right up to press. When I finally read it, I was kind of disappointed that I don't mention the legal team enough. And in particular, I want to go on, and I came to know and love Sheila as Sheila, so I still refer to her in the book as Sheila. But Naidruva Rush played a much larger role in things than that book would lead you to believe. Again, because of the drama aspect of it, you know, I give her credit for some stuff, just not nearly enough. Sheila and I worked together. Sheila would often be how to put it. Sheila has this amazing drive and commitment driven by a fierce love. And I had never met anyone like Naidruva until that time. And I thought she was pushing too hard sometimes, too. And again, as the lawsuit went on and I came to learn more and more, Sheila was right on the money, a lot. I'm going to come back to the trash in a moment, and boy, isn't that something. So put the trash aside for a moment. Sheila should have been mentioned more. Latika and Keshava should have been mentioned more. So I also do not want you to think that I am the brains behind the operation. All right? I pushed as hard as I can. I pulled as hard as I can. I stumbled towards the light as best I could. But one problem with the book is it's not me. It's you guys. And I'm sorry as I read it that I didn't mention more of the people more. Entire segments had to be removed in the editing process. And I want to point out one. As I'm reading the book this time, I come to the chapter with Ford Green, who was Anne-Marie Bertolucci's first lawyer. Okay. And, I talk a little bit about him. Beginning of the next chapter, it begins, Ford Green, you know, wasn't cutting the mustard, wasn't getting the job done and had to be replaced. And 3 days ago I realized, oh my gosh, the entire story of how he wasn't getting the job done got cut. So Ford Green wasn't getting the job done, and I want to come back to that too, back when I come back to the Bertolucci. Again, my concern here is that you understand is a much broader picture, and there's a lot broader base to what was going on. Okay. I wrote it because Davy and Jyotish and I had those discussions, and here's how it goes. Lawsuit's over a year. Man, what a story. Someone ought to write a book. Okay. Fast forward a year and a half. Back up at the village. Boy, you know, John, someone should write a book. Okay. Now, fast forward 6 months. Talking to Swami Kriyananda. John, someone should write a book. Okay, now I get it. Now I get it. Okay, okay. You know, it's like someone should write a book and you want to look around. Who else is behind me that he might be looking at? So I started to write it years after the events. Not fresh. We had to put it down, had to take that time, figure out what it all meant. So we come back. So in an effort to make it as accurate as possible, because keep in mind, those who do not like what it says will try to find any fact, no matter how insignificant, but any fact. If I say it was on a Tuesday, they're going to, no, look, it was on a Thursday, not a Tuesday 14 years ago, you know. So I tried to make it as accurate as possible, and indeed, you may count on the accuracy of what is in there. If it's in there, it's the truth. All right. And we had a protective order. Now, SRF, you know, I'm hesitant to ding SRF too much in these days where we are now trying to find that rapprochement, and it might happen with the new leaders, probably not the current leadership, but the next generation of leadership. You know, there might really be a coming together of the missions into one. And I don't want to say too many bad things about those people that I really didn't like there. I mean, I hesitate to call them liars in front of you. I'd rather do it quietly on the side. But I went through, and so everything that is in there you can count on as being accurate from my standpoint. And I say that because there's some things in there that you know, you might find surprising, and you might go, oh, that really how it happened? That's really how it happened. That really is how it happened. You know, like my talks with Kriyananda. You know, he really talks that way. It was really, when he first hired me over the phone, this before we met, you know, I'm used to clients, hey, here's a problem, John, you know, I took some money, or someone took some money, or the contract's not working out, blah, 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 blah. No, Kriyananda is talking about aspirations and goals and destiny and all of that. And I'm going, you know, I didn't say it. This is a lawsuit, buddy. You know, so you know, so you can imagine me at the desk. You know, we're struggling always towards the light. And so part of my own experience was to come to understand that he is the real deal. You know, I mean, that he walks the talk, and not only that, but gosh, he seems to have talked a lot of people into walking the talk and really living life at a, you know, good living, high level. It's wonderful. So I was so impressed with Kriyananda, the person, that I decided I could become involved. And also, by the way, you know, it was a terrible mistake for me to become involved at all. I shouldn't have become involved at all. I was told, we were led to believe that it's a simple little lawsuit. Okay? Now, if I had known that the lawsuit about to be filed was going to be filed by Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher with the largest Sacramento law firm involved. It was going to have all these federal claims. It was going to involve stuff way beyond my depth. Okay? It would have been malpractice. No, really, it would have been malpractice for me to go forward. I can't handle this case. All right? But it's going to be a little bitty lawsuit. Now, okay, all right, you know, a year maybe. Gosh, it might even be 6 figures, pulling numbers out of the air, meaning a lot. And then when the lawsuit was served on us, it was almost kind of like, well, no, John, now you go ahead and answer it. You know, the first thing was, we need more people. All right. We're going to be outgunned. And, you know, what is that? I need a bigger boat. You know, I need a bigger boat. So I bumbled into it and should never have done it. And then, of course, almost lost a lawsuit. Almost lost a lawsuit. Just months, within 2 months of being served with the lawsuit, we've got a preliminary injunction against us. Now, you know, these people, you know, as I say in the book, if these Ananda people are not as smart as they look, if they think I can help them. So, and then I had that heartfelt thing. So we have an injunction entered against us. We need more lawyers. It's not me. I'm really sorry. Sorry, guys. I had a terrible 2-hour drive home from the court that day, thinking on how I just screwed up so terribly. And then, instead of him going, well, thank you, John, you know, I appreciate your assistance, and sorry you weren't as good as we thought you were going to be, but good luck. No, Kriyananda wouldn't do that. He kept me on, thought he saw something here, I don't know. And as it turns out, of course, I am so glad he did. Instead of firing me, we brought on Ananda people. Sheila was a #1 person. Latika and Keshava came on at the same time. And we just melded into a working group like it was meant to be or something. And it was only because Naidruva and Latika and Keshava and the other people who helped came on that I was even able to hang in there and get something done. And keep in mind also, when the trials came, we reached for outside counsel for that. Trials nowadays are these major motion pictures, so you have to pretty much have a team to put on something. The federal case in Sacramento was a month long. The Redwood City case was, gosh, 5-6 months long before it ended. So we had to bring in other people. These other people are mentioned in the book, but again, not to the extent I'd like to give them credit for. All right. Then as we're going along, and the lawsuit's now developing, and we don't lose completely, and we have our legal team in place, and now we start really fighting back. So it was after about 6 months that we really started the fight that took 11.5 years to be completed with the final judgment in 2002. Let me share some stuff along the way. Now, prior to the being brought in 1990, I'll confess, I'd seen Yogananda's picture on a book or two, but that was about it. So I'd studied in Eastern religions and all that, but I didn't really know even the philosophical underpinnings of what I was getting into. What a guy. What a guy. Another reason I'm so grateful for being brought into this case is because it's exposed me to Kriyananda, and even more than that, to Yogananda. I immediately, of course, had to read the autobiography, and I read The Path. It was only the original Path out then. And these guys, they put the hook in me. All right? This was really something. So the lawsuit became more than just a job, more than just another client. It became a personal experience. And I feel that Ananda has led my way in opening my eyes in many respects, many respects. So one of the things I loved most about the lawsuit was SRF said Yogananda meant we get all his stuff. Well, how do you disprove that? You can only disprove that by the detailed work of peeling away all of the facts. What did Yogananda really mean? Well, what did Yogananda say? What did Yogananda do? So we turned, at one level, the case became a history lesson. And the more that SRF tried to keep Yogananda's history secret and suppressed, I guess, under wraps, the more we delved. And in the book, I've included some of the vignettes of Yogananda's life. Some of the stories that we discovered, they weren't hidden, but we discovered them afresh, if you will, in the context of the lawsuit. As I was looking at these experiences, it occurred to me, Yogananda's experiences, him being sued, him being betrayed by people he trusted, him losing a lawsuit, people saying scurrilous things about him. They actually accused Yogananda of being a sex cult leader in Florida, for example. I was struck how these events in Yogananda's life seemed eerily parallel to what we were going through. Now, wishful thinking? Maybe, I don't think so. And so what I tried to do in the book was include some of those excerpts to show what I think is how Kriyananda is really the direct disciple who's following in Yogananda's footsteps. I mean, the other disciples, I'm not saying they have it easy, but the other original disciples, what did they do? Well, they preserved. But they didn't have to get a place like Mount Washington or the Ananda village. They didn't go out lecturing on the road to get the money and the wherewithal to make it happen. It was really, I became impressed that it was Kriyananda who was living the Yogananda legacy. Not just teaching it, modifying it, trimming it down, making it pretty, but really living it. And I think that's one of the true mind-opening moments for me in the entire case, was that, gosh, I think I'm on the right side here. Okay, I'm not just a lawyer, because, you know, I do represent some bad guys from time to time. You know, dang, not only is it an interesting case, but I am working with good people with something that really matters. Now, I got to tell you, that's a rare privilege. Maybe you've all had it here, and that reflects the fact that you're sitting here today. You're a little more aware, you're a little more probably personally honest, a little more enjoying, realizing the world in certain ways, but most people do not have a meaningful existence. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. And you, Ananda, has given me some meaningful existence that I really appreciate. Not on the path, this incarnation, yet. Now, and I don't want to talk too long here, but I have a few more points I'd like to make. One has to do with the Bertolucci lawsuit. Now, big picture, lawsuit started in 1990 by SRF. In 1994, there was another lawsuit filed. Looked like a different lawsuit at first, but that was before we found out that Anne-Marie Bertolucci, who was the plaintiff in that lawsuit, that employment discrimination lawsuit. Let me say that again. Anne-Marie Bertolucci was the plaintiff in the employment discrimination lawsuit concerning her employment at Crystal Clarity. That's the lawsuit. It's hard to, it's important to remember, it's an employment dispute. Okay, all right. Well, that lawsuit began in 1994. And when Michael Flynn was brought in, oh, I'm sorry, let me explain. That was begun in 1994. We very quickly learned that prior to filing that lawsuit, Anne Marie had been flown down to Mount Washington, had met with Diamata. Now, she's only been on the path, what, a couple years as a trainee. I mean, you know, I don't even think she had Kriya at that point. She flies down, she meets with Diamata for lunch, we are informed. She meditates in Yogananda's preserved room. Whoa! I mean, who gets those kind of honors after years and years on the spiritual path? Well, Anne Marie did. She met with people down there. She was given recommendations. She was sent back to the Bay Area. Now, as soon as I heard that, is this really a separate, independent employment lawsuit? Maybe, but I'm beginning to doubt it. Then what happens is they bring in, they being, in my opinion, SRF, brings in Mike Flynn to represent Anne Marie Bertolucci. And I got to tell you, Flynn is a bona fide character. Oh, yes, and I'll try not to use profanity as I describe it. Okay, so I'll give you just a couple things, just to set the mood. So we meet Mr. Flynn right before one of the depositions in the case, and he introduces himself. Hi, I'm Michael Flynn, and you go, yeah, so you're going to be representing, Anne Marie. Oh yeah, I represent. We fight cults. So, you know, we busted the Scientologists, and we fought the Bhagwan up in Oregon, and we're against cults. And I go, well, you know any background about the religious teachings or anything like that? And he goes, well, you know, I've heard of this Daya person. I don't know if he or she is involved in this case or not, but I've heard of them. Yeah, well, he'd heard of this Daya person, who he or she, because he was Daya's trusted, personal, confidential advisor. It's not, who is this Daya person, okay? So first of all, the guy lied to my face from the first time I met him. All right, so deposition's going to begin. Now, the deposition takes place in a room, shorter than this, but, you know, a long conference room. And let me see, there was Sheila and I and probably someone else, might have been even Latika. Were we there? And we're down at one, and we're huddled kind of talking what we're going to, how we're going to examine this witness this time and that sort of thing. Long table. Flynn comes in, puts his bag down at the end, closes the door, and goes out and talks in the hallway with Bertolucci and Green. And we're standing down here talking. Suddenly, the door bursts open. Flynn looks in like this. He looks down at his bag, looks up at us, looks down at the bag, closes the door. Okay. Now, my grandmother, bless her heart, used to say, what you say about others is what you mean about yourself. Now, you can't go too deep in that. You know, it begins to get circular and... But just like the duality of the real life, there's an element of truth to it. And Flynn was that kind of guy. Flynn obviously thought we would be going through his bag because he would have been going through our bag. All right. At any rate, the guy turned out to be one of those people. There are a few people in the world who you can say with some level of confidence, if their mouth's moving, they're probably lying. Okay. And Flynn was one of those people. There was not a thing he told us that wasn't some prevarication. And so, as it began to become clear that Flynn was a person he is, and he's good, you can do amazing things if you are unfettered by the facts, truth, or the real world. If you just get to make up stuff as you go along, well, it's wonderful. Okay. And so one of the issues that became very, very troubling, Diamata must have been a good person. I mean, she must have. She had all those years with Yogananda, all that meditation, all exposure to all those years of exposure to the lessons. She had to be a good person, but I didn't see it. She lied to me in depositions. She hired people like Flynn, and she let those dogs loose. And then, as the lawsuit progressed, and I said I wasn't going to say bad things about him, but here we go. And as the lawsuit progressed, they began to pull more and more outrageous stories out of the air. So we're starting to win, meaning free up, Yogananda's copyrights. And SRF starts pulling these screwy arguments out of the air. Oh, he didn't really write it. It was really written by a corporate body, a bunch of unnamed monks and nuns who wrote together and did it. Well, I don't think so. It was published under his name. It seems to be his teachings. He seems to be crediting it. They were willing to say that Yogananda didn't write what Yogananda wrote, that it was something made up by other people. And they said that because if it had been made up by these other people, they could have kept the copyrights. If that doesn't work, then he wrote them as a work for hire. SRF hired Yogananda, and everything Yogananda wrote, he wrote as an employee. Right? Now, if he had written it as an employee, they would have won the works. But of course, that's like, I don't know. The whole concept is ridiculous. That Yogananda's writing, Yogananda's mission to the world reduced down to the hired help, you know? And I was disappointed that these spiritually advanced people would apparently say anything that needed to be said to win. I'm still disappointed, shocked. I was shocked at the time, disappointed. The lawsuit also raises certain issues. There was some question about Kriyananda and his activities and what he did going back to the 60s. And, you know, that has gotten out into the internet, and that's still out there. And those stories are not fully accurate, and they do not tell the full truth of what's out there. One issue that came to mind, and there's a school of philosophy, a school of history rather, which focuses on, it's often called the hero in history or the great man in history. And there are some people who, because of their role in either a movement or the progress of the times or great movements, rise above and have significance beyond their own lives in what they do. And I think Kriyananda is one of those people. In other words, Kriyananda presents both a human being and a message. He is both a person, and as a person, he is naturally a human being. But he also teaches a message which goes beyond this reality. And I was impressed with Kriyananda's importance beyond the person he was. And I hope that the book has now set in a better, clearer context, not only the role that Kriyananda has in taking Ananda forward, making the world a better place, and I'm not being facetious in that way, making the world a better place, but it also explains more of the human being, too. And I do think he is a great man in the sense of a Sidney Hook sort of, the historian Sidney Hook or Thomas Carlyle, as one of those people who really changed the world around him more than a person like I ever will, just because I'm dealing with the wife and the kids and the dogs and what's going on with the mortgage in this next case. It's a more contracted view of the world. The world needs people like Kriyananda, and as we're uncovering the history of Yogananda, it also occurred to me that the history, the day-to-day history, doesn't have much meaning without putting that history in some sort of larger context. So I could tell you, here's what Yogananda ate, on the morning of Tuesday, July 5th, 1935, as he's in, Pittsburgh or something. What's the significance of that? I find it personally fascinating just to look at all these little tidbits, but that's the historian in me. We need Kriyananda or someone like that who can now make sense out of that. So what I'm hoping is that through the book we have both the increase in knowledge about the facts of Yogananda's history, his background, and we have Kriyananda who can make better sense out of that. Another point in the book is the trash. Now, brief summary of the trash. When it became apparent that Flynn was really motivated and sent by SRF, there was a decision to try to investigate that further. So, Sheila hired a private investigator, all up and above board. Sheila hired a private investigator. Find out what you can about this Flynn guy, he's down south. Private investigator goes, okay, well, we'll do some record check, and, we usually go through the garbage. Sheila asks him, going through the garbage, is that okay? Yeah, we do it all the time. If it's in the garbage, it's thrown away. It's trash. And the long line of cases saying if you've thrown it away, the police can look at it, all right? If it's in the garbage, the police can go through your garbage and they can find that and that can be introduced as evidence. All right? Fine, investigator, go ahead then. If you think it's okay, go through the trash if you think that's going to help. Boom, wonderful, no problem. What did happen is when the Redwood City investigator hired a San Diego area investigator who hired someone to go out and actually do the trash grab, that someone was just a kid who had no training whatsoever, went out there, and here's what he did. Flynn had his trash behind a gate. So the guy grabbing the trash opens the gate, steps inside and grabs the trash. Now, in that action, the Bertolucci lawsuit was lost. Upon such a thin reed like that, so much can depend. Here's what happened. Kid grabs the trash. Turns out Flynn's sleeping in the office, okay? Flynn hears the guy open the gate, do the trash thing. Flynn comes out, chases him down the alleyway. He runs away and gets away, but Flynn gets a license plate. Flynn traces the license plate to the kid. The kid tells him it was a San Diego investigator. Asks the San Diego investigator. The San Diego investigator says, I'm not telling you. Flynn files another lawsuit, one of the many lawsuits which spin up. And 2 years later, the San Diego Court of Appeals tells this investigator, yes, you've got to tell Flynn who your client is. The San Diego investigator, 2 years later now, tells Flynn, my client's a Redwood City investigator. Flies up to Redwood City, takes a Redwood City investigator. Sheila was the contact at Ananda. Now, we happen to have drawn a Boy Scout judge, I use the term figuratively, a Boy Scout judge who got really upset that anyone would go through another lawyer's trash. Might not be illegal, but he didn't like it. So what happened in the Bertolucci case? I want you to understand this. The trash, which I still think probably was legal, resulted in this Redwood City judge imposing an order, and here's the order. During the Bertolucci trial, Bertolucci can call any woman to testify about anything that happened between that woman and Kriyananda at any point in time in any context. And indeed, there was testimony about something in 1966 and 69 and stuff like that. So, remember, This is an employment discrimination lawsuit concerning how Bertolucci was treated at Crystal Clarity. It's no longer an employment lawsuit. It's now about this parade of women coming in and talking about, you know, Kriyananda skinny dipping back then, and you know, Kriyananda wasn't celibate. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he was publicly married. There really wasn't a question about him being celibate. That was never an issue, was it? What does Kriyananda's celibacy have to do with an employment discrimination lawsuit? But the way it works, all of these women testified about these events. It became no longer a discrimination lawsuit. It became now a personal attack and critique on Kriyananda himself. Well, not only can these women say anything they want to about anything that happened at any point in time, even remotely connected with Kriyananda, but we can't cross-examine them. Ooh, I thought there was still a Sixth Amendment somewhere. But no, we cannot cross-examine them. Not only that, we can't introduce evidence which might indicate that what they say isn't true. More than that, we can't even ask them questions which would show we don't believe what they say is true. Are you ready for this? We can't even ask them questions which would show we don't believe what they say is true. And finally, the jury must never know why we're not cross-examining these witnesses. They must never know why we're not introducing any other evidence to refute what these women are saying. So it became the tail wagging the dog, and I have felt terrible ever since that we lost the Bertolucci portion of that lawsuit. I think it was a travesty, and it could have been appealed. Had it been appealed, that egregious order would have not stood for a moment. But what does an appeal mean? You go up, you win. It's a glorious appeal. Years later, you've won. You're back to trial. And I also respect Ananda's decision, therefore, to take this loss and move on, rather than continue to wallow in the legal world's resolution of these disputes. But it was a very real shame that okay. I get so excited about these things, and it all comes flooding back to me. All right, so the trash. Why is there a sanction order at all? Why does it matter that we went through the trash at all? And here's why it matters. In the numerous sets of requests for documents we were given, we were asked once, I think it was like number 54 or the fifth set of requests for documents. We were asked for any documents concerning Janice Marino. Turns out, 2 of these documents in the trash concern Janice Marino. So, I want you to appreciate, God, I love the way the law works. I want you to appreciate the reason why we were sanctioned was because we had failed to disclose 2 documents in response to discovery requests when those documents had already been thrown away years before. So the hook on which we were penalized was because we hadn't disclosed the trash, even though it was totally irrelevant to the case going on. But something's going on there. Something's happening here. And that's what you've got to ask yourself. That's what I was asking myself. Wow, how could this possibly happen? How could this simple little trash grab turn into this psychodrama, you know, in the court where we just got to sit there and take it day after day with whatever they say? Well, welcome to the world of the law. And what really concerns me most is, of course, that testimony, that testimony which we couldn't refute, we couldn't question, we couldn't introduce anything. That is the testimony that's now out there in the internet. So it looks like to the world we agreed with it. No, no, no. It was, in my opinion, a travesty. But perhaps a travesty towards some greater end. Now, I'm gonna wrap up. I appreciate your patience. What are the issues? What's it all about? What's it all about, Alfie? Okay, we go through all this trauma. Man, I hope there's something more meaningful than just a couple lawyers duking it out with some clients, either winning or losing because of what their lawyers do. Well, and I think there is. I think I have found a couple. I don't pretend to have any idea these are real issues to take away. Everyone can find their own. But the two things I've taken away from it, one is if you believe in your cause, even in times of doubt, even when times people are telling you you're wrong, even when you're not certain how it's going to turn out, you push on towards the light. Ooh, I love simple things. So, don't give up. Don't give up. And the second lesson I took away from it was that regardless of what's happening, regardless of what the people are saying, you trust in yourself and you trust in those that you trust. And you do the best you can, regardless of what people say, and you give all that you can. And you know, it's kind of funny, 12 years and the lessons that I've taken away from 12 years of this, you know, tooth and fang litigation, and I mean, you know, it was pretty brutal there for a while, are these simple principles, you know, that you always try to do right and you do all you can towards the right. Now, I think Latika is going to be talking to us in a couple minutes about how we too can still do all we can to push towards the light. But I wanted to just share with you some of my thoughts. I know they're somewhat scattered and it's been a long 12 years, but I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share with you what has been a wonderful experience from my standpoint. It was a hoot, as we say in the trade. And I'm just so impressed with both Kriyananda and the Ananda community, and I consider it a joy to have had this experience and a continuing experience. And I appreciate everything you guys have done and all of your support, and especially the people I worked with during those many years. And I thank you very much. I don't know, questions and answers maybe later, but I think I have taken my time, and I thank you very much.
A hoot. Okay.
It's a legal term.
A legal term. Okay. Well, we'd like to take a few minutes with Latika. Latika was on the legal team, sort of front line, definite front line for a number of years. That meant that she burned her candles on both ends. And I think she has a few stories to share with us before we finish the program. Latika is the general manager of Ananda worldwide.
Hi, it's a joy to be here in Seattle again. It's been a couple of years since I've been here. Thank you all for coming. And I just want to say one of the things we talked about often during the years of the lawsuit is, what are lawsuits about? Why do we have so many lawsuits in our lifetime? What is it about our society that causes this? And of course we had, John, who is really a historian. I mean, he says he's a lawyer, but he's really a historian. And we would talk about how in previous earlier times in Kali Yuga, if you had a dispute with your neighbor or somebody across the continent or something, you just started a war. You sent your soldiers in and they fought the other soldiers and they duked it out, and then whoever won took over that territory. Well, we don't do that so much anymore, but we still have knights in shining armor and who fight our battles for us. And basically lawyers are the champions who go into court to handle disputes. And so John was our knight in shining armor. He was amazing through all those years. And yes, I do have a special friendship with him, but you know, even when it was so difficult, and it was clearly something beyond anything he'd ever thought he would get into, he never faltered. He never gave up. He constantly kept going and showed, you know, not only his own strength, but also his ability to be open to what was happening, what was coming into his life, and accept it and make it into something beautiful. And he's really done that over the years. So thank you, John. I just wanted to mention also that, you know, that song, Many Hands Make a Miracle, is obviously one of Ananda's theme songs. We use it for many different events, but the history of this lawsuit is not just a history of the drama of the lawsuit itself and the courtroom and the depositions and everything that went on behind the scenes. It's also a drama of how we as a group of Guru Bhais, of friends, as an organization, handled an incredible crisis in our lifetime, in our experience of Ananda. We really did come very close to the possibility of losing everything, at least at Ananda Village. We could have lost everything at one point. And the faith, the commitment, the dedication that all of you showed, that everybody throughout the Ananda world has shown over these past 22 years, basically, it's 10 years since the end of the lawsuit, has been so inspiring to me. I've been working with the finances of paying off the last of the debt since the end of the SRF trial. And I've been just continuously so inspired and enthralled by how Divine Mother has worked through all of us to bring this debt down to the point where we are almost finished. We are so close, you can smell it. It's very, very exciting. When the lawsuits were over in 2002, it took us a little while to kind of organize everything and figure out where we were. I mean, there'd been so much going on in all the years and so much patching together of things financially. That took a little while to figure out exactly what did we still owe, who did we owe, how were we going to pay this back. And we had come down to the point where out of the $12 million that we spent defending ourselves in all of the lawsuits, $12 million, isn't that amazing? We still had $3.2 million to pay off. And in the past 9 years, we have paid off all but a little less than 300,000 of that. We've got 1/10 left. That's astounding. That's just astounding. That's like 1,200 people have over all these years paid $12 million. It's not just the individuals. Obviously, the communities have put money in. Ananda Village has sold things and cut timber, and we did all kinds of things to raise money to help pay the lawsuit. But 76.4% of all of the donations that have come in to help pay down these lawsuits has come from Guru Bhais, devotees, you. It's all the individuals who have believed in Ananda, believed in Master's teachings, believed in Kriyananda as a true disciple, have lived the life, have understood what Ananda means, and have fought to keep it in existence. And I just want to thank you all so much. As I say, it's been incredibly inspiring to me to be the one paying the bills, but always knowing that there are all these wonderful people out there who are contributing to help make that possible. So that's, I think, really all I want to say, unless Preman and Padma wanted me to say anything else. No? Okay. So God bless you all. Thank you.
And I think I speak for all of us when I say, Latika is alluding to 1,200 or so folks, and probably 800 of those or so are Ananda Sevaka order, or meaning those who've been around for 7 years or more back then, in 92. So add
20-some years to that, and people who've been around a long time on their small Ananda wages have been contributing on a monthly basis on top of their local tithes and pledges, on top of the temple fund pledges and the Ananda Worldwide Ministry contributions. There's like layers and layers and layers, but hey, what else have we got to do, right? But for the lawsuit, it was for our survival, yes, but it was really also more than that. It was standing on the principle that Yogananda's teachings belong to everyone, not just Ananda. We really felt that we were fighting this battle, meaning defending ourselves. We would not have initiated the battle, but we had to defend ourselves in order to be true to Yogananda's teachings, which the teachings of a great teacher belong to everyone. And now everyone can publish many of Yogananda's original works, which only came to light in the process of defending ourselves and doing the needful research. So we're grateful for that. And Ananda's copyrights also for Kriyananda's works are being held in trust with the intent of going into public domain as early as possible, because he did not want them owned by Ananda either, not by the organization, but he wants those also available to everyone, and standing by that principle. And so many, many here in this room and throughout all of the Ananda temples everywhere, and people who live in Nebraska and Missouri and all kinds of places where there aren't temples, have been contributing through all these years, all these millions of dollars, but it's really for freeing, for true freedom of the teachings of a great master. Imagine if one of the Christian sects said the Bible is just ours. You know, it's just unthinkable. And so that same thing applies to Yogananda's teachings as well. So tonight, this whole campaign, this whole last phase that Latika was referring to, they came up with the name at Ananda Village, Going, Going, Gone, because there's the hope to put this less than $300,000 behind us, get it over with after these 20 years, 20 plus years, 22 years, and be able to free ourselves to move forward. You know, we'd love to build a fellowship hall. That's the next thing on the docket here. And at every, Ananda Village would love to build a temple that can house everyone when they come and not have to be out of doors in the winter time, because so many people want to be in the services there. And every Ananda community, the work in India is just busting loose, opening up new centers everywhere. And so to be free to do that and have this all behind us is part of what we're hoping to arrange tonight. And many of you who have been giving monthly all these years, we've encouraged you to think about borrowing or finding some way creatively to donate a year's worth, so we can make chunky donations today and in that way magnetize everything to be able to put it behind us. And so we encourage you to think now, meditate upon what you'd like to give. I think there are donation cards on most chairs, if not all, and we have pens. And where's Prem Shanti? Can you play a little soft chanting while people take a moment to reflect upon what you would like to give? And if you need a pen, raise your hand and they'll bring some around. And again, don't feel like you have to, but if you feel to, this is the moment to do it. And we hope to be able to make a big dent
in the remainder of the balances due. There are 2 baskets here in front on the altar, and whenever you're ready and whenever you feel, you can bring your gift up to the basket, one of the baskets, and spend a moment at the altar. And you don't have to do it one at a time. You can do it several at a time. Let's do it Indian style. Yeah.